Do not put my name on the birth certificate. Those were the first words my husband said to me after our daughter was born. I was still shaking from 21 hours of labor. My hospital gown was damp at the collar, my body felt torn open, and our baby was asleep against my chest with one tiny fist curled beneath her chin. 2 hours earlier, Adrian Wexler had cried when the nurse placed her in my arms. He had kissed my forehead, called her perfect, and taken photographs for both our families. Now he stood at the foot of my bed in a charcoal suit as if he had stepped out of a board meeting instead of the delivery room, and looked at our daughter like she was a failed investment. "What did you say?" I whispered. His eyes moved toward the door. He was checking whether anyone could hear us. "My family needs a male successor, Claire. You knew that. I knew your father was obsessed with the family name. I did not know you would reject your own child because she is a girl." His jaw tightened. "This is not about rejecting her. Then sign the certificate." He exhaled through his nose. "I cannot." The baby stirred against me. I put one hand over the back of her head, shielding her from a conversation she could not understand. "Why?" Adrian looked at me then, and the calm expression on his face frightened me more than anger would have. "Because I already have a son." For a moment the room became soundless. The monitor beside my bed continued to pulse. A cart rattled somewhere in the hallway. My daughter made a soft breathing noise against my skin. I thought the medication had changed the meaning of his words. "A son with whom?" He did not answer immediately. That was how I knew. "Vanessa Cole?" I asked. Vanessa had been his executive assistant for 3 years. She knew his travel schedule, his preferred restaurants, the birthdays of every board member, and the exact tone to use when she canceled dinner with me on his behalf. Adrian's silence confirmed it. "How old is he?" 7 months. The answer hit harder than the confession. 7 months meant that while I was injecting hormones into my stomach, while I was waking at dawn for blood tests, while Adrian was holding my hand in fertility clinics and telling me we would get through it together, Vanessa had already been pregnant with his child. I looked down at the baby on my chest. Our daughter had Adrian's dark hair. She had my mouth. Her eyelids were still swollen from birth. "What is his name?" I asked. "Leo." "And you are choosing him." "I am choosing the option that protects everyone." I laughed once. It came out broken. "Everyone." "The board begins the refinancing review next month. My father has made it clear that the succession issue must be settled. A public scandal involving 2 children will damage the company. If I acknowledge Leo as my son and successor, the family can manage the rest privately." "The rest?" I repeated. "You mean me and your daughter. I will provide for both of you." I stared at him. He had rehearsed this. That realization hurt in a place deeper than betrayal. This was not panic. It was a plan. While I folded newborn clothes, he had been deciding how much money would make abandonment look respectable. "Get out," I said. "Claire, you are exhausted." "Get out. We should discuss this when you are thinking clearly." I reached for the call button with a hand that would not stop trembling. Adrian stepped closer. "Do not turn this into something uglier than it needs to be." I pressed the button. A nurse answered through the speaker. "Can I help you?" "Yes," I said, keeping my eyes on my husband. "Please remove this man from my room." His face changed for the first time. "Claire!" I pulled our daughter closer. "Remember this moment, Adrienne. It is the last moment you will ever be allowed to decide what happens to us." The nurse arrived with hospital security before he could answer. When the door closed behind him, I did not feel powerful. I felt empty. I held my daughter and cried so quietly that she never woke. My younger sister Naomi arrived 20 minutes later carrying coffee she was not allowed to give me, and a pink blanket our mother had knitted before she died. She took one look at my face and put everything down. "What happened?" I tried to speak, but the words stuck behind my teeth. Naomi sat beside me. "Is the baby okay?" "She is perfect." "Are you okay?" "No." That single word opened something. I told her everything. Adrian's son, Vanessa, the board, the birth certificate, the sentence about providing for us. Naomi listened without interrupting. When I finished, she stood and walked to the window. I always knew he was cold, she said. I did not know he was cruel. He cried when she was born. Adrian performs kindness when there is an audience. There was no audience. There were nurses, there were photographs. There was a story he could tell later. I wanted to defend him. Even after hearing his confession, some part of me wanted to gather the 4 years of our marriage and prove they had not all been false. Instead, I looked at my sleeping daughter. What am I going to do? Naomi came back to the bed. First, you are going to name her. I had been afraid to choose without Adrian. Iris, I said. Naomi smiled through tears. Iris Bennett Wexler. I looked at the empty space on the birth certificate form. No, Iris Bennett. Bennett was my name before marriage. It was the name on my architecture degree, the name on the small design firm I had closed when Adrian convinced me that our family would need my full attention, and the name my Uncle Robert had once told me never to surrender completely. The thought of Uncle Robert brought back another memory. For nearly a year, an attorney named Miriam Sloan had been leaving messages for me about his estate. I had returned the first call, learned there was a complicated legacy interest connected to Wexler Development, and postponed the meeting because I was in the middle of fertility treatment. Then pregnancy made everything else feel distant. My phone was on the tray beside me. Naomi followed my eyes. Who are you thinking about? Miriam Sloan. The lawyer who keeps calling. Yes, call her. It is 6 in the morning. Then leave a message that ruins her breakfast. I almost smiled. I called. Miriam answered on the second ring. Claire. Her voice was alert, not sleepy. I am sorry to call so early. I have been hoping you would call at any hour. My daughter was born tonight. There was a pause, then genuine warmth. Congratulations. My husband just told me he has a 7-month-old son with his assistant. He refuses to sign our daughter's birth certificate because his family wants the boy to be the company heir. The silence on the line changed. Miriam's voice became precise. Do not sign anything Adrian or his family sends you. Do not agree to a private settlement. Do not allow anyone to remove documents from your home. Can your sister stay with you? Yes. I will be at the hospital at 9. What does Uncle Robert's estate have to do with this, eh? Possibly everything. Miriam arrived at 8:47 wearing navy trousers, low shoes, and the expression of someone who had already decided not to be intimidated. She waited while the nurse checked Iris, then closed the door and placed a thin leather folder on the table. Your uncle was not simply an engineer for Wexler Development, she said. He was one of the original partners in the Urban Projects division. I knew Uncle Robert had worked with Adrian's grandfather decades earlier. I had not known he owned anything. When the company reorganized, Miriam continued, Robert exchanged his partnership interest for 11% of the voting shares in Wexler Urban Projects. He retained those shares through a private holding trust. Why did no one tell me? He tried. Repeatedly. So did I. Shame moved through me. I thought it was old paperwork. You were told to think that. Adrian asked the estate administrator to route communications through the family office. Robert anticipated interference, so the trust names you directly as successor voting trustee. I stared at her. I own 11% of Adrian's company, not the entire parent company. 11% of the voting power in the division currently supporting Wexler Holdings' refinancing package. More important, the old partnership agreement contains an executive conduct clause. What kind of clause? If a senior executive's dishonesty creates a material, reputational, or financial risk during a lending event, any shareholder holding more than 8% may demand an independent governance review. Naomi let out a low breath. Miriam opened the folder and showed me copies of signatures, amendments, and a page with Uncle Robert's handwriting in the margin. Power should never depend on being invited into the room. I touched the words with one finger. He knew. He knew the Wexler family valued usefulness more than loyalty. He did not know what Adrian would do. But he knew you might someday need leverage that could not be taken away by a husband. I began to cry again. This time the grief was different. Uncle Robert had died believing I might never read what he left me. Yet he had protected me anyway. Miriam waited until I could breathe. "Do I have to use it now?" I asked. "No, but you need to understand that Adrian came into this hospital believing he controlled the story. He does not." At 10:15, the first proposal arrived. Adrian's father, Charles Wexler, sent it through the family attorney. The document described my marriage as irretrievably strained, offered me a generous monthly allowance, guaranteed private education for Iris, and required me to waive any claim involving Wexler succession governance or voting interests. It also required confidentiality. My daughter was 6 hours old, and they were already trying to purchase her silence. Miriam photographed every page and placed the original in an evidence envelope. "Do not respond," she said. At noon, Adrian texted me. "I am trying to prevent a public war. Please think about Iris." I typed 3 different replies and erased them all. Finally, I wrote, "I am thinking about her. That is why you should be afraid." He did not answer. The next 3 days were the longest of my life. My body hurt in ways no one had warned me about. Milk came in while I was meeting with lawyers. I cried because Iris would not latch, then cried harder when she did. I slept in pieces of 20 minutes and woke from dreams in which Adrian was carrying another baby through our house, while every door locked behind him. The Wexlers sent flowers with no card. Vanessa sent nothing. Adrian did not visit. On the 4th day, while Naomi packed our hospital bags, I received a photograph from an unknown number. It showed Adrian holding a dark-haired baby boy beside a window. Vanessa stood next to him, smiling at the child rather than the camera. The photograph looked intimate and ordinary. Below it was a message. "I did not know he was going to do this to you at the hospital. We need to talk." I showed it to Miriam. "Do not meet her alone," she said. Vanessa agreed to speak by video that evening. She appeared on the screen without makeup, her hair tied back, the baby asleep on her shoulder. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. "I am sorry," she said. "No, you are not." Her eyes lowered. "Not enough. Not when it mattered." "How long?" "Almost 2 years." I gripped the edge of the table. 2 years meant the affair had begun before my first fertility procedure. "Did you know he was sleeping beside me after leaving you?" "Yes." "Did you know he held my hand during treatment?" "Yes." "Then tell me why you are calling." Vanessa shifted the baby higher on her shoulder. "Because Adrian told me Leo would be formally recognized after your delivery. He said you would accept a private arrangement. Yesterday, I saw an email between him and his father. Once the succession issue is settled, they plan to move me and Leo overseas under a family support structure. There will be no shares, no board status, and no public acknowledgement beyond paternity. You expected them to reward you. I expected Adrian to keep one promise. He did not keep any to me. I know." "No, Vanessa. You knew facts. You did not know what it felt like to spend 2 years believing your body was failing while your husband was creating a second family with the woman who scheduled your medical appointments." Her face crumpled. I did not comfort her. After a long silence, she said, "I have messages." "What kind of messages?" "Messages about you, the board, Leo, and what Adrian planned to say after the birth. He told me he only needed everyone moving in the direction he chose until the refinancing was complete." Miriam leaned toward the screen. "Are you willing to preserve those messages and provide them to independent counsel?" Vanessa looked at her son. "Yes." The evidence arrived the next morning. There were hundreds of messages. Adrian discussing my fertility treatment schedule so he could avoid overlapping appointments. Adrian telling Vanessa that the appearance of a devoted marriage reassured lenders. Adrian promising that a son would stabilize the line. Adrian writing that if I delivered a girl, the transition would be simpler because my emotional state could be used to explain my withdrawal from public life. One message made me physically sick. "Claire will fight for a week, then she will remember she has no position without me." I read it 3 times. For 4 years, I had mistaken access for partnership. I had believed I stood beside him when in his mind I stood behind him, visible, when useful, removable, when inconvenient. The independent governance review was scheduled for 12 days after Iris was born. Charles Wexler called me personally the night before. His voice had always made rooms quiet. He was 72, chairman of Wexler Holdings, and a man who treated emotion as a defect in other people. "You are making a serious mistake," he said. "I made the serious mistake when I married your son. This review could destabilize financing that supports thousands of employees. Your son destabilized it when he lied to lenders and the board. Personal misconduct does not automatically equal corporate misconduct. He used my fertility treatment as part of a stability narrative while maintaining a hidden family with an employee. He then tried to remove me and my child from the succession structure hours after her birth. That is not private misconduct. That is strategic deception. You have been advised by people who do not understand what is at stake. I understand exactly what is at stake. You want me to protect the company from the consequences of the behavior the company rewarded." He was silent. Then he said, "Bring the child tomorrow if you must, but do not turn her into a weapon." I looked at Iris asleep in the bassinet beside me. "You made children into weapons long before she was born. I am bringing her, because every man in that room is preparing to discuss her future as if she were an abstract problem." The board meeting began at 9. I arrived at 8:55 wearing a black dress that did not fit my postpartum body and flat shoes, because I still could not walk without pain. Iris was strapped against my chest. Naomi walked beside me. Miriam carried 2 legal boxes. The receptionist stared when the elevator doors opened. I had attended company events for years, but I had never entered the board floor as someone with a vote. Adrian was already seated when we walked in. He looked exhausted. For one dangerous second, I remembered the man who used to bring me tea during hormone injections. Then I remembered that he had been texting Vanessa from the clinic parking lot. Charles sat at the head of the table. 10 directors filled the remaining seats. 2 representatives from the lending consortium attended by video. Adrian stood. "Claire, this is unnecessary." Miriam placed the voting trust certificate on the table. "No," I said. "For the first time, it is properly necessary." I took my seat. Iris made a small sound against my chest. Every face turned toward her. Charles cleared his throat. "We are here to determine whether the conduct allegations trigger a formal review under Section 14 of the Urban Projects Agreement." Adrian's attorney began by describing the matter as a painful marital dispute. He said I was recovering from childbirth under emotional strain and reacting to unexpected personal news. I listened until he finished. Then I asked, "Would you describe falsifying a stability narrative for lenders as marital?" He paused. I continued. "Would you describe using a spouse's fertility treatment schedule to conceal an affair with an employee as private when that concealment is part of executive planning? Would you describe promising 2 different children the same succession position while refinancing a family-controlled company as irrelevant to governance?" Adrian leaned forward. "No one promised succession to 2 children." Miriam opened the first box. "Then let us begin with your messages." For 40 minutes she read them into the record. The room changed slowly. At first directors avoided looking at me. Then they stopped looking at Adrian. A message about maintaining my public visibility until after loan approval caused one lender representative to request a copy. A message describing Vanessa and Leo as temporary leverage made Charles remove his glasses. Adrian interrupted twice. "Those words are being taken out of context." Miriam replied, "There are 600 pages of context." Then Vanessa joined by video. Her voice shook, but she did not retreat. "Adrian told each person enough to keep them moving in the direction he wanted," she said. "He told Claire he was committed to their marriage. He told me Leo would be recognized as heir. He told the board his family life was stable. He told his father the scandal was contained. None of those statements were fully true." Adrian's face hardened. "You are doing this because I refused your demands. Vanessa looked directly into the camera. No, I am doing this because I finally understood that after you used Claire, you plan to use our son the same way. Iris began to cry. The sound cut through the room. I swayed her gently and continued speaking. This is the child Adrian refused to name 2 hours after she was born. He did not reject her because he doubted paternity. He rejected her because the Wexler family taught him that a daughter has less strategic value than a son. Charles flinched. I looked at him. You asked me not to make her a weapon. She is not a weapon. She is evidence of what your system does to people when usefulness becomes the price of belonging. No one spoke. The board voted 9-2 to open the full review and suspend Adrian from succession-related decisions during the investigation. His was one of the 2 opposing votes. Charles did not vote with him. When the meeting ended, Adrian followed me into the corridor. Claire, wait. Naomi stepped between us. I touched her arm. It is all right. Adrian looked at Iris, then at me. You have no idea what you have started. I started nothing. I stopped cooperating. You are humiliating me in front of people who have known me my entire life. You humiliated me in front of the child I had just delivered. She will never remember that. I will. His eyes flashed. You think 11% makes you powerful? No, knowing what you are makes me powerful. I walked away before he could answer. The public story broke 3 days later. A financial reporter learned that Wexler Holdings had opened a governance review during refinancing. The article did not name me, but everyone in our social circle knew. By afternoon, my phone filled with messages disguised as concern. Are you sure this is wise? Think of the employees. A child needs both parents. Family matters should stay private. No one wrote a husband should not plan his wife's disappearance while she is giving birth. Adrian's mother, Evelyn, came to my apartment the following afternoon. She had never visited without calling first. Naomi opened the door, saw her pearl coat and rigid posture, and asked whether I wanted her removed. I almost said yes. Instead, I invited Evelyn into the living room. She sat on the edge of the sofa while I held Iris. Her gaze rested on the baby for several seconds, but she did not ask to touch her. I did not know about Vanessa, she said. Do you expect that to comfort me? No. Did you know Adrian planned to reject his daughter? Her fingers tightened around her handbag. Charles told me there was a succession complication. A complication has a filing number. This is a child. Evelyn looked toward the window. Men in this family make decisions and tell the women afterward. Then you understand why I am not accepting another decision. She turned back to me. I understand more than you think. But if the refinancing fails, people will lose jobs. Pension funds will be affected. Families who had no part in Adrian's choices will suffer. There it was again, the weight of thousands of strangers being placed on the body of the woman who had just given birth. For 4 years, I said your son used my patients as corporate insurance. Now that the policy has expired, you want me to renew it for the employees. I am asking you to consider the scale of the damage. I have. Have you considered why the company's stability depends on women accepting humiliation quietly? Evelyn's eyes filled, but her voice remained controlled. You think I never paid that price? I looked at her then, not as Adrian's mother, but as a woman who had spent 40 years seated beside Charles at dinners where everyone waited for him to speak first. What did it buy you? I asked. She had no answer. Before leaving, she placed a small envelope on the table. Inside was a copy of a letter Uncle Robert had written to her 12 years earlier. He had warned that the family's obsession with a male line would eventually turn children into competing assets. At the bottom, Evelyn had written a reply she apparently never sent. I am afraid you are right, but I do not know how to stop it. I carried the letter into my bedroom after she left. Iris was awake, watching light move across the ceiling. I know how I whispered. You stopped cooperating. At night, I fed Iris in the dark and wondered whether I had destroyed her chance at a peaceful life. My body was healing, but slowly. I bled through a dress during a legal meeting and locked myself in a bathroom to cry. I leaked milk through a blouse while a banker questioned whether I understood the trust documents. I signed affidavits with one hand while holding my daughter with the other. Strength did not feel like the speeches people later imagined. It felt like exhaustion with paperwork. Adrian filed for temporary access to Iris and accused me of using the governance dispute to interfere with his parental relationship. He had not visited her once. At the first family court conference, his attorney said Adrian had been denied the opportunity to bond. I placed the unanswered messages on the table. Everyone asked him to arrange a medically appropriate visit through counsel. He had ignored them because the terms did not allow photographers, family staff, or control of the location. The judge ordered supervised visits. Adrian attended one. He held Iris for 11 minutes, asked the supervisor whether a photograph would remain confidential, and left early for a lender call. I stopped hoping he would become the father she deserved. Hope had been the most expensive thing I gave him. The review lasted 7 weeks. Investigators discovered that Adrian had authorized executive reimbursements for apartments used by Vanessa, misclassified travel related to the affair, and allowed the company's communication staff to prepare private statements about my supposed withdrawal before I had agreed to anything. The misconduct was not large enough to destroy Wexler Holdings, but it was deliberate enough to destroy trust. The lending consortium demanded management changes. Adrian was removed as president of Wexler Urban Projects and placed on indefinite leave from the parent company. Charles remained chairman, but an independent director took control of the refinancing committee. Adrian called me the night the decision became final. "You wanted me gone," he said. "I wanted the truth recorded." Do you know what my father said to me? No. He said he raised me to protect the company, and I became the greatest threat to it. I almost felt sorry for him. Then he added, "You could still fix this." There it was. Even at the bottom, he believed women existed to repair the damage men created. "I am fixing it," I said, "just not for you." 4 months of negotiations followed. The Wexler family wanted certainty. The lenders wanted clean governance. I wanted Iris protected without turning another innocent child into collateral damage. Leo had done nothing wrong. I made that clear in every meeting. "I will not agree to language that punishes him for the circumstances of his birth," I told Miriam. "He deserves support from his father. What he does not automatically receive," she said, "is a corporate succession right? Created by a private trust with specific definitions." The old trust did not say male heir. That assumption had been cultural, not legal. It prioritized the first child born within a legally recognized marriage, unless the board approved a different succession beneficiary before birth. No such approval existed. Iris had the first protected position. When the Wexlers realized that their tone changed, Adrian asked to meet at the house before the next negotiation session. Miriam advised me not to go alone, so Naomi waited in the kitchen while I walked through rooms that still contained the life I had expected to return to after the hospital. The nursery was untouched. A wooden moon hung above the crib. Adrian had assembled it himself one Sunday, complaining about the instructions and laughing when we installed the legs backward. I stood in the doorway and felt grief rise so sharply that I had to grip the frame. He came up behind me. "I kept it the same," he said. "For whom?" "For Iris. You refused to give her your name. I was under pressure. You were under pressure when you had the affair. When you watched me inject myself. When you planned my disappearance." He looked away. "I made terrible decisions." "No, a terrible decision happens once. You built a system." He stepped into the nursery and touched the crib rail. "I can be her father. You can become a man who behaves like one. Those are not the same promise. I love her. You have met her twice. She is my daughter." The possessive word made my entire body tense. "She is not a share certificate, Adrian." "I know that." "Do you?" "Because every sentence you have spoken since her birth has been about what she is to you, what she costs you, what she can take from you, or what she can restore." His face collapsed for a moment. "I do not know how to undo this." "You cannot undo it." "Then what do you want?" "I want you to stop asking the people you hurt to design your redemption." He sat in the rocking chair we had chosen together. For the first time in years, he looked small. not humble, only stripped of the room's automatic obedience. My father will never forgive me, he said. This is not about your father. It has always been about my father. That is the tragedy, Adrian. You had a wife, a daughter, a son, and a woman who believed your promises. You turned every one of us into an argument with a man whose approval you were too frightened to lose. He began to cry. I had imagined that seeing him break would satisfy me. It did not. I remembered loving him. I remembered the future I had placed in his hands. Grief softened me for 1 second, but softness was no longer permission. I took the hospital bracelet he had left on the dresser and placed it beside him. This has her name on it, I said. If you ever want to know her, learn to say that name without calculating what it does for yours. Then I left the house. Charles requested a private meeting. We met in Uncle Robert's former office, a room the company had preserved but rarely used. His old drafting table remained near the window. Charles stood beside it for a long time. Robert warned me that the family would eventually confuse bloodline with character, he said. He was right. He was often right in ways that made people dislike him. People dislike boundaries when they are accustomed to access. Charles looked at me. You sound like him. I wish I had listened to him sooner. He sat across from me. I failed my son. I did not rescue him from the sentence. He continued. I taught Adrian that every relationship had to serve continuity. I praised him when he chose appearances over honesty. I thought I was building discipline. You built fear. Yes, and now you want me to help preserve the family name. I want to preserve the company and protect both children from the damage we caused. Then stop calling one of them the heir and the other the problem. His eyes lowered. That was the first useful thing he did. The final agreement took another month. Iris retained the protected succession interest created by the family trust. My 11% voting position remained independent and could not be absorbed into marital property. An outside ethics committee became permanent. Executive relationships with direct reports required disclosure. Family image campaigns could no longer be charged to operating divisions. Leo received a separate financial trust funded personally by Adrian, along with legally enforceable support. The agreement did not place him in the corporate succession structure, but it did not erase him. Vanessa resigned and moved closer to her mother. She gave a sworn statement, accepted responsibility for her role, and stopped asking me to forgive her. That restraint mattered more than an apology. Adrian resisted until the annual shareholder meeting. He arrived with a prepared speech accusing me of exploiting a private tragedy to seize influence over a company I had never helped build. I had expected it. When he finished, several shareholders applauded out of habit. Then I stood. I did not bring Iris that day. She was at home with Naomi, safe from the room that had once tried to calculate her worth. I did not seize influence, I said. My uncle earned these shares by helping build the division your family later treated as an inheritance machine. I did not create a private tragedy. Adrian did. I only refused to sign the document that would have hidden it. He stared at me across the auditorium. I continued. For years, this company described itself as a family, but families do not require daughters to disappear so sons can look legitimate. Families do not use one woman's fertility treatment as cover for another woman's pregnancy. Families do not call dishonesty stability simply because the quarterly report depends on it. The room had gone completely still. Adrian stood. This is exactly the spectacle I warned everyone about. No, I said. This is the record you warned everyone not to create. Miriam called the vote. My 11% did not control the company by itself. It did something more important. It made silence impossible. 3 institutional shareholders joined the independent directors. Charles abstained from protecting his son. Adrian was removed from the family succession committee and barred from holding an executive position for 5 years. His face went pale when the result appeared on the screen. He had spent his life assuming the room would always belong to him. For the first time, it did not. The divorce became final 9 months after Iris was born. I kept my home, my voting interest, and my name. Adrian received scheduled visitation he rarely used. The court established support for Iris, but I built my life as if the payments might stop tomorrow. I reopened Bennett Civic Design in a small office near the river. At first I took modest projects, a library accessibility renovation, a women's health clinic, a child care center inside an old warehouse. I hired 2 young architects who had left firms where their ideas were praised in meetings and credited to men afterward. Work returned a part of me I had surrendered without noticing. I had not closed my firm because I lacked ambition. I had closed it because Adrian convinced me that supporting his future was a shared dream. It had only been shared in the sense that I carried it too. Vanessa wrote once nearly a year later, "Leo is walking. He has Adrian's stubbornness. I am trying to teach him that being chosen is not the same as being loved." I read the message twice and replied with one sentence. "Teach him that another child's dignity is never the price of his security." She answered, "I will." Charles visited Iris on her first birthday. He arrived alone without a photographer or family attorney. He brought a wooden set of building blocks that had belonged to Uncle Robert. "I do not expect you to trust me," he said. "I do not. I would like to earn the right to know her." "That will depend on whether you can know her without assigning her a function." He nodded. I allowed him 1 hour. He sat on the floor in an expensive suit while Iris knocked down every tower he built. Each time, he rebuilt it. It was not redemption. It was practice. Adrian's life did not collapse in one cinematic moment. It narrowed. Without the title, invitations disappeared. Without the company, aircraft travel became ordinary. Friends who had laughed at his private cruelty became unavailable when association carried risk. He moved from our house to a serviced apartment and later to a smaller condominium. He still had money. Consequences are not always poverty. His real loss was control. He could no longer decide which woman would be acknowledged, which child would be valuable, which story would become official, or which door would close before anyone else understood the room. On the second anniversary of Iris's birth, I took her to Uncle Robert's grave. She wore a yellow coat and tried to place every fallen leaf on the stone. I told her about the man who had protected her before he knew she would exist. I told her he believed power should never depend on being invited into the room. She understood none of it. That was all right. Children should not have to understand the battles that made their safety possible. Sometimes people ask whether I won. They expect me to mention the shares, the board vote, the divorce settlement, or Adrian's removal. Those things mattered. But my real victory happened much earlier in a hospital room when I was bleeding, exhausted, terrified, and holding a newborn daughter whose father had just decided she was inconvenient. I told him he would never decide what happened to us again. At the time, I did not know whether I could keep that promise. I kept it anyway. I used to believe love meant being chosen by someone powerful. Now I know love is building a life in which no child has to audition for belonging. Iris will grow up knowing she was never the lesser child, never the disappointing outcome, never the problem standing between a man and his inheritance. She will know that her mother was devastated. She will also know that I stood up, not because I was fearless, because she was watching even before she could remember.